Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for slight delay getting started. So the intention of this session is to just give you all the very basics, the 101 of ESOPs, and then we'll work with each one of you who needs to develop an ESOP plan to help you apply some of these principles to developing an ESOP for your organization. So this is a very basic session, covers at a very high level the fundamentals of an ESOP, and then we'll work with you to implement that in detail. Then we'll proceed to the next slide. So what is an ESOP? It is a right to buy a certain number of shares of the company, not a right to buy a percentage of the company. It's commonly mistaken. It is a right to buy those any shares at a predetermined price, which is generally referred to as the strike price for the stock option. And then it is a right to buy those shares at some point in the future. And that's a schedule that will be created at the time of granting an ESOP. What it is not is it's not a share in the company. So a person who holds stock options does not hold shares, does not have any of the rights that come with shares, voting rights and so on and so forth. Stock options also generally do not have anti-dilution protection. So as further rounds of funding take place in the company, option holders typically get diluted. And then just proceed to the next slide, please. So the first question that a lot of people did ask leading up to this session is, when should you create a stock option plan? And so a lot of this presentation is my opinion, my experience with stock options, both at Infosys and the two startups that I've created, as well as the entrepreneurs that we've advised at Villgro. So it's my belief that you should actually create a stock option plan as early as you can. And the first institutional investors typically will require you to create one. So if you've already created one, then typically that becomes one less point that they want you to do. I've also found that if there are delays in creation of an ESOP plan or making grants of ESOPs, employees begin to suspect the intentions of the founders. And that's an unhealthy work environment. You want your employees to trust you. You want your employees to be working very hard at making the enterprise succeed. And stock options are one way in which you can build that sense of ownership. You can build that sense of participation. And therefore, delaying stock options is just unnecessary because it vitiates those purposes that you had in mind. So let's talk a little bit first about price considerations. What are the various types of prices that you have? So first is, on the day of grant, there is a market price for the company. And let's assume in the case of this example, that's 100 rupees per share. You can fix your strike price at any price that is at or below that market price. And so for the sake of this calculation, I'm saying, let's say we say the strike price is 10 rupees per share. And so if you give somebody 4,000 shares, which means you're giving them the right to buy 4,000 shares of your company at the payment of 10 rupees. So when they exercise the option, which means they convert an option into shares, they will pay you 10 rupees per share and they will get 4,000. Now, what happens is, subsequently at some point, once the option vests, and I'll speak about what vesting means a little later, they convert that and they exercise that and convert it into a share. So let's assume that the market price on exercise is another 200 rupees up. So it's a total of 300 rupees on the day of the exercise. So now this employee is holding shares worth 300 rupees and they've paid 10 rupees for it. So you can see how the wealth is being created in their hands because A, the market price or the market value of the share went up from 100 to 300, but also that they got it at below even that original market price and therefore they're creating additional wealth. I just say they hold on to this for a while and they sell it maybe 2 years later when a buyer comes along or you do an IPO. And then at that time, the market price has gone up by another 300, so it's 600 rupees per share. So now your employees have made 590 rupees for every share that they hold. And so this is the way in which the various prices work. And there are some tax implications that I'll come to, but just remember this particular example. So why should you create an ESOP? I think the first is that it reduces your cash costs. It allows you to share the wealth that's being created within the enterprise with the people who are key or critical to your success. Therefore, gives them a sense of ownership. They feel like they're a part of this journey. They feel like they're not just working to create wealth for you and for your investors, but they're also part owners in the company. They're owners in the success. Particularly, it can be very helpful in motivating key employees. And these are key employees who join you in critical positions. They give up cash compensation they may have at other companies, and therefore they can reduce your cash costs. Because of this sense of ownership, because of the vesting schedule, it also creates a little barrier to exit for employees, and therefore it has a role in reducing attrition. People say, oh, I'll stick around till at least 50% of my options vest, or I'll wait till my options vest and then I'll leave, even if they may have other attractive options outside. And so it helps reduce attrition. There are some disadvantages, and I've seen this over the last 17 odd years that I've been involved with options in some way or form. One is it creates a vesting employee syndrome. So there are people who have got stock options and now do the bare minimum that's required to not get fired while they're waiting for their options to vest. And it's important to recognize that, to be guarded against it, and make sure that that's not the case with your enterprise. While you are spreading the wealth, the fact remains that the proportion of wealth distribution between employees and founders at an individual level can be quite extreme. And so as a founder, you could own 30-40% of the company, or even 60-70% of the company if you're a single founder company. And your senior most employees who will be as qualified as you are, will have 2 or 3% of the company. And so that disproportionate wealth sometimes does create some friction. And then if you have a system by which you're granting options to only some employees, it could create a culture of haves versus have-nots. And again, something to think about, something to be careful about. As I come to it later, we'll see that my experience has been in Indian startups. Restricting stock options to the senior folks and critical early employees is the most effective way of making options work for you. But then that has this disadvantage that may create this culture of haves and have. So let's just get familiar with some of the terms in the stock option world. And so the first is grant date. This is the date on which the grant is made to the employees. So this is you will have to follow a process by which the board or a subcommittee of the board approves the grants. and then you issue grant letters with a particular grant date. Then there's a grant amount, which is you have the right to buy N number of shares. It has a strike price, which is the price at which you will be able to buy those shares. It has a vesting schedule, which is the option may be exercised as per a certain schedule, and this schedule is the vesting schedule. I'll come to that in a subsequent slide. It will have a vesting start date. This is not always the grant date. Sometimes you have employees who joined earlier, and then you might want to give them a credit for the time that they've spent. There may be a delay in holding a board meeting and issuing the grant and so on and so forth. So you may want to set a vesting start date, which is in the past. Then there's the question of exercise. Yeah, sure.
People who join later on, request you all to just make sure your lines are muted, because I can still hear a lot of background noise. Okay, guys, go ahead.
So the act of exercise is the act of paying that price, the strike price, and converting an option into a share of the company. And so the right to exercise is really the vesting schedule. And then there'll typically be a window within which you can exercise, and I'll come to that in some detail. So that's the exercise window. So after that exercise date, vesting date, you can give employees 3 months, you can give them 10 years. I've seen both, within which they can exercise their vested options. Then sometimes there are provisions for acceleration of vesting, and so there are certain circumstances in which you might want to permit accelerated vesting. I'll come to that in subsequent slides. And then you've got to think through what happens on termination or when an employee leaves the company. And so we'll deal with that as we come. So I've given an example here of 4,000 ESOPs at rupees 10 per share, starting on 1st January 2017, and vesting as follows. 25% on the anniversary of the first year. So 1st January 2018, 25% of those options, which means 1,000 options, can be exercised. And every month after that, for the next 3 years, that is 36 months, 1/36th of the balance gets vested. And so over a 4-year time frame, this entire pool of 4,000 stock options will be fully vested. The exercise rules are any time after vesting, within 10 years, the employee can exercise. So this gives them an opportunity to vest, but at the same time, they don't have to pay up the money and exercise till a liquidity event comes along, which is that you've got either investors coming in who are willing to buy vested stock, or you've got a M&A activity, or you've got an IPO or something like that. And then if an employee leaves without being fired, that is without cause, then the employee has to exercise their vested options within 3 months. And so if somebody quits and, say 30% of their options are vested, that 30%, if they want to, they can exercise within 3 months of their last date of employment. So that's the way this particular one has been set up. So I've got a few graphs here which show you what the various types of vesting schedules are to think about. And so this one is a cliff. So on the 12th month, at the end of the 12th month, 25% vest, and then evenly every month after that. So in this example, on the 30th month, if somebody leaves, 62.5% of the options are vested on that date. Some of the other schedules that you could consider are where you have 4 even cliffs. So at every 12, 24, 36, and 48th month, 25% of the options that have been granted vest. So that, crunches up the vesting a little bit. And so there is more incentive for people who are, say, in the 19th month stick around till the 24th month so that at least 50% vest, and so on and so forth. In the even schedule, there's nothing to stop them, or there's nothing major to stop them from leaving at any point if they want. At Infosys BPO, we had stock options that were backloaded, and so the first year 10% vested, the second year 20%, the third year 30%, and the fourth year 40% vested. And so there was greater and greater incentive to continue, but then the risk is that people in the beginning will leave because there's no major incentive to sticking around. So that's another model that does exist. In fact, the first set of Infosys options had a 5-year cliff. That is 100% vested on the 5th year. But it was already a public company. And so there, any bonus shares that you got were immediately vested in your hands. And the company was declaring bonuses from time to time till, the securities law got changed and stopped giving bonuses and made it stock splits instead. But that's also a structure that's common. So some things to think about are, what time period do you want to vest your options over? Is it 4 years, 5 years? That's what's common. Or do you want to make it even longer, 6 years maybe? I think, and again, this entire presentation is not intended to be legal advice because I'm not a lawyer and it's not been vetted by a lawyer. But I read somewhere that Indian law actually requires that stock options have to vest only after 1 year of being granted. And so you may have to have a cliff of 1 year. And then you have to think of what sort of vesting schedule you want, an even, same every year, backloaded, front-loaded, and so on and so forth. Acceleration, whether you want to allow any acceleration within the stock options, and I'll deal with it in a little more detail later. And then how do you handle unpaid leave? So if somebody takes maternity leave or paternity leave or a sabbatical, so it's common to either freeze their stock option vesting and then start it again once they join back, or sometimes just cancel unvested stock and then you give them fresh grants when they come back, so on and so forth. So some things to think about is, where is your company at now, and what is the timeline for the future? How long is it going to take? And therefore, how important is keeping your current talent and some of the talent that you intend to hire in the immediate future? How important is keeping that, retaining that talent? And then the last thing is aligning it with your own vesting schedule. And so it creates a strong sense of equity and evenness if you and your co-founders also have vesting on your common stock, which is in the same sort of vesting schedule as that of other employees. And so in the companies that I've worked at, I've always set it up so that the founders vesting and the employees vesting has the same schedule. So the next thing is structuring of vesting and exercise. We may be getting a little bit in the weeds here, but I'll quickly leave this thought because in case it comes to you. So, finally, stock options are a right to purchase a share, but you could as well, give them the shares on the first day and then create it as a repurchase right. And I'm not sure whether this is permitted in Indian law. I suspect it might be, but there are some benefits from it, and I know it. I did it in my US company. So in the purchase right, the employees can purchase only when the ESOP vests. And then, if there's a cashless exercise, which means they're selling without, as soon as they exercise, then it's a short-term capital gain. So they're ending up paying taxes at the maximum marginal rate and they have no shareholder rights. Whereas in a repurchase right, you give them all, in the example that I gave you, all 4,000 shares. But the company has the right to repurchase those shares if the employee leaves. So if the employee leaves, if you remember from my example, the schedule was 12 months and then 136 for every month. So if an employee leaves in the 30th month, 62.5% is vested which means the company has the right to repurchase 37.5% of the shares. And so the company exercises that right, pays the strike price to the employee, and then buys it back at the cost the employee paid. And so this way, the employee has long-term capital gains at all times because they're holding the shares from day one and they have shareholder rights. So it's something to think about, but as I said, we're going into the weeds. But if this comes up, you now know how to handle that particular question. And it's a good idea to seek legal advice on whether this is possible or this is common in India. To the next slide. So the next thing to think about is, when do you want to grant to your employees? One way of doing it is whenever they join, or sooner. You put their names up at the first board meeting that's held after they join, or you do it by circulation, and then you grant them the options. The other approach is to do it after they complete 1 year. And so you're sure that this is an employee that is contributing, that is an employee who fits with your culture. So you kind of got a 1 year probationary period when you're testing the employee out, and you're deciding to grant them options only if they prove their worth to the enterprise. Especially because you want to be discerning about the grants of options. You don't want to give just everybody. The other one is where you have an ongoing grant, and so people are not given a huge amount of options when they join, but every year after the annual appraisals, you are handing out grants to employees. And you could have a combination of, substantial grant in the beginning when people join, and then you give them ongoing grants every year or every 6 months, based on a certain schedule. So that kind of keeps them motivated because the number of options is increasing. And the golden handcuff also then continues because the vesting starts from the next year for the second grant, and from the third year from the third grant, and so on and so forth. And so at Infosys, we had a substantial joining grant, and then every year we'd hand out grants based on performance. And that was quite useful in keeping people there long term. So let me speak a little bit about the tax implications, but I think Senthil, is speaking about this in detail. And so I'll defer to and apologize for any mistakes I might be making. So you're allowed to price a stock option in India at any price, but you have to determine the market price on the date of the grant. And then if you're granting below market price, that difference is an expense for you, the company, and then that gets amortized as a non-cash expense over the vesting schedule of the option. Now, if the employee then exercises on a particular date, they get shares at a certain, which have a certain market price, and that difference now becomes income in their hands, and therefore they have to pay tax on that. And then once they sell, the difference between the selling price and the market price is a capital gain depending on how long they've held it. And so it's a short-term gain or a long-term gain. So there are some tax implications in the design of your plan. So if you're designing your strike price is below market value, you have to take into account that you will be taking a charge in your profit and loss account. It will be a non-cash charge. So here, this is a graphic representation of that same thing. You will be determined by an independent valuer, and so the market price on the grant and the strike price difference is borne by the company. The market price on exercise minus the market price on grant is income to the employee at the time of the exercise. And then if they hold on to it, the market price on sale minus the market price on exercise, the capital gain to the employee. The next question is, who should you give options to? I know at Infosys we created this culture where everybody from the gardeners and drivers to the senior vice presidents and presidents used to get stock options. However, it has been my experience that in India, not too many employees at the middle and junior level appreciate the value of options. And so the considerations are they taking a hit to their existing salaries? Are they coming on board at lower than their quote unquote market price? Are they making a significant contribution to your success? Are they taking ownership for your success? Did they take a risk in coming in and working for your enterprise by coming in early in your journey? You will find that you can say yes to some of these things only for your senior management, your VPs and the C-suite, maybe for a few early middle managers. But for vast majority of people, you'll find they say that they still expect a 20-30% increase over their current comp, and they really are not truly taking ownership on success and making a significant contribution. They're just doing a job for a salary. And so issuing options to those people means there's less to give to the true pillars of the organization, the true contributors. And so my advice to most people is that you restrict it to the senior team and the key members of the middle team or the early members of the middle team, and don't distribute it broadly, even at the risk of creating a have-not culture. Because in India, it just doesn't get appreciated. People don't give it the value, and you don't get the value as a result. So in our startup, Gritstone Research, since we all came out of Infosys, we actually started out by making grants to every employee. And so many people left within the first year that we were just issuing them paperwork and then issuing them paperwork to take it back because nothing had vested. So then we realized it was just a waste. And then we concentrated our efforts and we gave many more options and topped up the options that were given to the senior people. And those are the people who really slogged to make the company succeed. So the next is the question of exercise. Exercise is the act of converting an option into a share by paying the strike price to the company. And so what's normal is that when a person is leaving without cause, that means you're not being fired, or you're letting them go not because they've done anything wrong, but just because you're downsizing or something like that, is you give them typically 2-3 months within which they can decide whether they want to exercise their vested options, and then they can exercise that and convert it into shares. It is generally, if the employee is not leaving the organization, it's generally uncommon for them to exercise because you don't know if the option is going to be worth anything. You don't know if there's going to be a liquidity event. So why should I pay even that 10 rupees and hold shares which are paper shares and not worth a lot? They actually are paper shares. And so especially if your exercise window is long, for example 10 years, people will not exercise whenever they vest, but they will exercise at the time of a liquidity event. Another consideration is whether you should build any sort of acceleration into vesting. And so some of the common triggers that I've seen is it says death of the employee. So out of compassion for their kin, you give some acceleration so that more of the options vest. The next is, a forced termination without cause. So, you are going through a downsizing and things like that. The employee hasn't done anything wrong, but you are asking them to leave. So in that case, you sweeten that by offering them a acceleration of 3 months or 6 months. The next is forced termination without cause when there is a change in control. So somebody acquires your company and then fires one of your employees. Should that employee be entitled to accelerated vesting? And then the last one is when the company gets acquired, should the stock options vest, or should there be acceleration vesting? The last two are not common, and the reason it's not common is the person who's acquiring your company is also acquiring it for the employees. If you accelerate their vesting and then those employees leave, then acquirer is left with less in their hands in terms of the key staff. And so if you have a program that allows for acceleration in the event of change of control, it makes your employees and your company slightly less valuable to an acquirer. So while it's common to put acceleration for change of control for founders, it's not common to put it for employees in general. Okay, I think I'm almost at the end. What you should do once you've designed your plan, employee orientation, where you explain what is an ESOP, you explain all the terms in the structure and rationale of the plan. Why is vesting like this? Why is there no acceleration? Why is why is the grant being made only after serving for 1 year, and so on and so forth. Answer all their questions that they might have. There are lots of resources on the web that you can circulate, allow them to educate themselves also in advance of the meeting. But it's also important to clarify to them that at the end of the day, option is only as valuable as the company that we're all working for. And so they have to realize that there are risks. This is by no means a guarantee. And so if you've taken a hit to salary and come to work here, and you're expecting that 100 times that wealth will be created through the stock option plan, there is no guarantee that 100 times wealth will be created. That will only happen if we all work together hard and succeed, and we create a liquidity event and so on and so forth. So highlighting the risks is very, very important, so that nobody says that you misled them later. But then also, make sure that it gives them that sense of ownership. It motivates the employees. It shows that the wealth is being spread and that we're all in this journey together and we all have to pull our weight. And that's the way in which the wealth will get created. Otherwise, 0 into 100 is still 0. And so, that's an important message to drive home. Okay. So with that, I've come to the end. I've just there are some questions that were posted. Let me just quickly run through them and make sure that we've got them all. Yeah. Okay, so there's one question which is somebody asks, for an early stage startup where all the stocks are with promoters, they're bringing in more employees, and whether ESOPs are right. They just thought we can give some common equity directly for early stage employees. So the main issue is one of vesting, and if you should have, and for those of you who don't have vesting on the common stock of the founders, I would strongly urge you to put vesting on your common stock immediately, because otherwise somebody can leave and then the rest of you are just stuck creating wealth for that person who has left. And so that's the reason why ESOPs are better, because they have a clearly defined vesting schedule, and they're not the economic effect is the same as giving shares. You can give shares with a repurchase right also. It works out to effectively the same. When is the right time to create ESOPs? As I mentioned, as early as possible. What is the procedure to create an ESOP plan? So you think through these various elements, and then we have lawyers who can help you with this, and then the company secretary will create some resolutions that will need to be passed by the shareholders and the board and the shareholders, and then after that the plan comes into effect. There are two types of structures where the company directly grants it, to where you can create a trust. In my mind, the company directly grant, there's some tax implications, you should have them studied. But in general, it's a good idea not to get too cute, especially if this is your first company. Just keep it simple. Don't incur a lot of cost in lawyers and accountants' fees in designing a complex structure. Next question is, what are the general guidelines to be followed for creation of the ESOP pool? What's the right time frame to give ESOP to employees? I think I've covered both of these. One question people have asked is, how do you distribute this among the various employees? And so one thing to do is to create a kind of a table of the current employees as well as the future plans of hiring, especially into senior and key mid-level roles, the roles for which you're giving options. And then, look at the size of plan that you're creating, maybe a 15% of the company as per currently capitalized. And then say, okay, if that is, 1 lakh shares, then distribute that in some ratio and proportion so that early employees and senior employees get more, mid-level employees and employees who join later get less. And then that, causes, you to create a plan by which you distribute that. Generally, thumb rule is your senior hires, people who are going to be key to the contribution of the company, should have at least, maybe 1.5% of the company, and so that, they feel enough sense of ownership. And if you have 5, 6 people like that, that's 5 or 6% of the company or 9% of the company that goes to those employees. Okay, more questions. Is it before or after investment? You can do it before. If you're doing it after the investment, the investors will make you design it. How do you take care of initial employees? You give them a higher grant because they've taken more risk, and you can give them an earlier vesting start date. What is the right percentage? As I just mentioned, maybe for senior people, 1.5%. But of course, you calculate the shares and then you give them those number of shares. But that's very common. Remember, they are going to get diluted because there's no anti-dilution protection for stock options. How do you separate sweat equity from ESOP, or is it part of ESOP? No, sweat equity is actually different. It's been legally defined in India. It's in return for certain services or IP that is brought to the company. It has some very strict rules around pricing. It has strict rules around lock-in and things like that. So don't use sweat equity where it is to compensate regular employees. Use stock options instead. Use sweat equity where it is appropriate. So people are bringing in some specific IP or something like that, then yes. How do you communicate risk associated with ESOP? I just mentioned that. Do an information session, explain what it is and explain the risks. How to count factors like commitment/trust versus qualification/skill while granting ESOPs. So as I said, look at things like what are the role that they're playing, what responsibilities are they carrying, how are they contributing, whether they've taken a hit to salary. If you factor in some of these things in the quantum of the grant, then you will be adequately taking into account these factors and compensating people for them. Okay. With that, I think we have. I've come to my end of my portion. So Anna, back to you. I think somebody else is also going to speak now, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Right. Thank you then. Thanks for that. Okay, so now we'll move on to Senthil, who will talk about taxation and valuation a little bit more in detail. And then you can ask specific questions related to those two topics to Senthil. After which we'll just keep it open for Q&A for all the questions you've had throughout the presentation and any other specific questions you may have for Mukesh, Guns, and Senthil. So with that, Senthil, I would like you to introduce yourself and then talk about taxation valuation in detail.
Yeah. Hi all. This is Senthil. I am from MCA Management Consultants Private Limited. We predominantly deal with valuation, due diligences, and specialized in taxation. So we'll be handling the valuation and the forming part and the taxation of this. So I'll just run through how this ESOPs are valued. So first, like a normal valuation of a company, so we do as per discounted cash flow method. So because it won't be a capital intensive unit or something, so net assets method will be rejected for this. A discounted cash flow method where all the cash flows for the next 3 to 5 years, depending upon each company, how it can be projected will be projected, and the same will be discounted to the cost of equity. And keeping in mind the beta, the risk-free rate of return, the return of the market, all those things will arrive out a value. Say a particular share is to be valued at, say, you've already given the share at 10, the share will be valued at 100 rupees. So this will be typically for a normal company valuation. What happens in ESOPs is, post this, after arriving at this 100, we'll go into a model called Black-Scholes model. So what this Black-Scholes model does it finds out the value of the option that you are giving to the employees. So how this is valued is, it's a particular formula. There are two parts to this. The first part will be the current market price, or the current price what the employee is ready to pay for this. So that will be that will be found out by the standard deviation of the market returns plus the growth, how the company has grown now and how the company is expected to grow, and how much time is being given for the exercising the option. All this will be considered, and I'll find out what is the price that this stock is worth of. From that, I'll be reducing the discounted value of the excise price. Say I'm giving on 1/1/2017, excise starts only at 1/1/2021. So I'll be discounting the excise price and discounting it now. I'll reduce both and I'll be figuring out as a call premium. So this call premium will be added to the excise price that will be decided by the board. Say now the board, depending upon the seniority of employees, can decide. For a very senior person, they can decide the excise price to be only 30. Whereas for a junior level employee, they can decide the excise price to be 80 or 90. So with this excise price, this difference, what we found out from the Black-Scholes models, will be added. So this is how we arrive out at a valuation. So the remaining price, the premium what is arrived out will be the advantage on which the employees will have to pay taxes. So this is how the ESOPs are valued. Any queries till now on the valuation part?
Senthil, this is Mukesh. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Senthil, a lot of our entrepreneurs come from technical, medical background, so they do not have understanding. So maybe simplifying your message will help them.
Okay. Then I'll do one thing. I'll break down the discounted cash flow method itself so that it's more easier to understand. So what do we do in DCF methods? It will be, we'll find out the cash flows from the revenue. We'll draw a normal profit and loss statement. With the profit and loss statement, we'll remove the non-cash items like, depreciation, all those things, amortization it will be removed, and we'll get the actual cash flow of the company for the coming years. Say that 16-17 will be taken as the base year, and from then I'll be projecting for 3 more years, depending upon the inputs from you. So with this, I'll find out how much is the company's cash flow going to be in the next 3 years. Then post this, I'll be finding out the cost of equity. Basically, cost of equity is what the company is expected to earn. Say it can be 15%, 16%, 18%, depending upon the market scenario, your comparable companies in the industry, and how the overall economy is performing. So all this will be considered into it. So what are the factors that we consider while finding out the cost of equity will be the risk-free rate of return. The RBI bonds, which is 7.47% now. And the beta will be the risk. So how is beta valued is, say your shares are likely to move up at 50% from the normal. So what are your comparable shares are likely to move? Say if they are likely to move at 40%, then your company is performing well. But there are, so when the comparable company's beta is 1, your beta will be 1.1 or 1.2. So when a person invests in your company, there will be more reward and more risk also in your company. So this is how beta is valued. And the third point in that will be the market return, how the market has functioned over the last 5 years or 10 years. You are able to get comparable companies within your peer companies, we'll be able to take that. If not, we'll go into a little bit outer circle, a macro level, and take other companies in the industry. So these 3 factors, along with your cash flows, will be discounted. Say, let's for example, by applying all this, your cost of equity comes out to 17% or 18%. So I'll be discounting the cash flows which have arrived at 16-17, 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20 with this 18% and arriving out a particular value. This value in turn will be divided by the number of shares in hand to arrive out per share value. discounted cash flow method. Any questions till now?
They have some background on that. Is there any regulatory requirement on valuation?
Yeah. No, you'll have to value the shares when you're giving it for the exercise price. When you're awarding for the thing, you have to get a valuation from a chartered accountant.
And this is needed by which regulator? ROC, income tax?
No, income tax. So because you will be taxing it. So when I come to the taxation part, I'll more explain about that. What will be taxed in the hands of the employees and why it is taxed.
Thanks, Senthil.
Yeah. So I can go ahead because Black-Scholes model is an advanced. So that's more of a formula application and option. So it's pretty close. From then DCF we find out an option price. That's it about this valuation part.
And then I've seen definitely over here only.
Okay, great. I thought someone was asking a question, but I think that's just background noise.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go to the taxation part now. So what happens?
Senthil,
Yeah.
again, request for you to keep it simple because a lot of entrepreneurs are.
I'll put it in a simple way. Yeah.
For the, so,
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So what happens in taxation is there will be no tax impact in the hands of the employer. It's only a tax benefit. So we will be able to claim that as an expenditure. So what the excise price, the difference price, say 100 is what the fair market value that is coming out now, and the excise price given for the employees is only 50. So it's like the employees, it's enough if they pay 50, they'll get a share of 100. So now the company will get 50 in hand, and the remaining 50 will be booked as an expenditure in the books. So the company will get an advantage of booking 50 as an expenditure. So this is from the company's point of view. So can I go to the employee's point of view?
Got wet, W?
You're trying to watch the system.
Does he need to change his classes or is it
It's down there. It's
Yeah, go ahead, Senthil.
Yeah.
There is background side.
Okay.
Can you all
Okay, so coming to the employee's point of view, what will happen? The taxation happens at two parts. So let's say the date of granting happens on 1/1/2017. So the date of excise happens from 4 years from now, 1/1/2021. So what will happen on the day when the excise happens? The employee will have to pay a tax on the excise price minus. So what is he giving to the company? So 50 and 100. So on the remaining 50, he'll have to pay tax. It will be taxable under the head salaries, and the companies will have to deduct TDS on that. So when it happens, the normal problem typically what employees face is saying that I am not going to sell the shares as of now. So why should I pay tax? Because without getting any benefit, they have to pay tax from the hand. But that has been the case now. So they'll have to pay tax when these shares are being transferred in their name. So that is from 1/1/2021 as salaries. So now let's take the employees hold the shares for a 2-year or a 3-year period. So if they are holding it for more than 3 years, then it becomes a long-term capital gain. They'll be taxed at 20%. If they are holding it for less than 3 years and they are selling it immediately, say 22 or 24, then they'll be taxed as short-term capital gain, which will be at 30%. So it will be the two parts of taxation. Any questions in this?
Okay.
Hello?
I think what will be helpful, Senthil, is after this we can share a model, a financial model for this, and insert specific comments in that specifically for Black-Scholes.
Sure.
And we can circulate that maybe later. So
no, I'll give two variants so that you can understand what will be the tax impact and both the cases.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'll just keep it open for overall questions that the entrepreneurs have.
Hi, Guns. Abhishek here. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is, Guns briefly touched upon two different models. One where you have shares directly given to the employees, and one is via the trust. Could we understand a little bit more about the pros and cons of both?
Refer to Senthil on that. I actually don't understand the differences between doing it direct from the company and doing it via trust. Or Mukesh, if you'd like to answer that.
No, I didn't get the question. Sorry.
There are two ways, Senthil. You can create a ESOP trust, and then shares are allocated to the trust, and then the trust grants the options to the employee. The other structure is where the company directly grants options to the employees.
What would be the advantage of the trust is that you will not want to dilute a company as of now. So company will be kept intact with you, like an investment company or something. Only the trust in turn will be giving the shares out, will be granting the options and all the stuff. So it's like more of a management. That's all. So and ease of the thing will be beneficial. That's it. Not of much of a big difference or a benefit.
Senthil, who can be the trustee?
No, you can. That's up to the board to decide.
Is there a specific requirement that promoters cannot be trustees or board of directors cannot be trustees?
No. It's up to the board to decide who can be the trustees. So typically, what happens in a trust is there will be people from the employee side also. They will want someone to be nominated in the trust board so that their benefits are taken care. So there is no other decision saying that board of directors should not be part of the trustees. So that can very much be there as trustees.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Abhishek, to answer your first question, there are the implications are very different, because when you are immediately issuing shares, the shares are getting transferred to the name of that employee or that colleague of yours. In case of using ESOP, first you are giving them an option to participate in it. It is only an option, as Guns explained at the beginning. It is still not in their hands till they exercise that option. So after they exercise that option, then only it comes to them. So there are many implications relating to motivation, performance. There are a number of other factors that kick in. In addition to that, it also depends on how many rounds of fundraising are you going to do. Because if you are at very early stage, your investors may want to have a say in it. If you have already decided your cap table, if you have already decided how many shares to give to whom, the team may believe that you have all the senior resources needed, all the skills needed in the team, but the investor may not agree and your business model may change drastically, right? So keeping that option open for a longer period might be a preferred option, especially in case of medical device companies where 3 to 5 years from now your customer segment could change completely, right? But if you have given shares now, you're already committed to it. You can still do transferring of shares at a later stage, but that's much more contentious discussions once you have given shares. So there are many fundraising related, performance related, team related, business related implications in deciding between immediately giving shares or using the ESOP and the trust approach, whereby you just give them an option and that option vests over a period of time.
So, thank you, Mukesh.
Any other questions from the group?
Senthil, one question. So, is there any difference of tax structure when we create a trust or the company manages the ESOP? Because generally the
No, taxation would, yeah, I answer the question. The taxation would be only in the hands of the employees. So for them, there is no tax difference. So the excise price and the actual fair market value, they'll have to pay a tax on that. So irrespective of where you're getting the shares from, you'll have to pay a tax. And when you're selling it, again, there'll be a capital gains. So taxation is not going to change anyway because of this.
Okay, and there will be no implication on the company side also, right? If the
No, company side, anyway, there's no tax implication.
Okay. No, even when the company is managing the ESOP, there will be no tax implication there, right?
Yeah, no, you'll be only claiming as an expenditure, that's all. Tax implication here comes only in the hands of the employees as a perquisite, that's all. And capital gains when they sell it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I think we did a great job of running through the slides and answering all the questions you had shared beforehand. So with that, we are good to close. The slide deck should be available after this, and also the recording of this webinar would also be available. So I'll share that with you all. If you have any other follow-on questions, please feel free to email me, and I can share them with Senthil Guns to get the responses from them. Great. So with that, we're good to close. Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks Guns, thanks Senthil, thanks Mukesh. Happy Friday, everybody.